So I've just pulled up at Longreef on the northern beaches. Going to try and do some astrophotography this evening. There is a little bit of a bank of cloud appearing on the horizon as we speak, so we'll see how that goes. But basically, I'm here to dispel a myth that you can't do astrophotography near a big city. We're on the northern beaches of Sydney here, city of 5 million people, and I'm going to try and get some astrophotography done. Now, I'm one that does tend to prefer astrophotography to be called nightscape photography. The reason being, you get to break it down into the two components, night and scape. Night, pretty obvious, nighttime. The scape means it's still landscape photography, it's just at nighttime. I see a lot of beginners, I know I was guilty of this, is you realize the capability of a camera and you start taking images of the Milky Way and the detail and all that, but you completely throw out the window all of the rules of landscape photography. You know, don't focus on any composition or anything that completes the image, no foreground, and as a result you've got an image of the sky. Now, as a landscape photographer, we would never do this for a sunset image, so we shouldn't do it for a night image either. So my advice to, I guess, correct that is get to your location early. As you can see, it's still daylight here. Still plenty of people about. Get there early, and that way you can scope out your composition a little bit better. If you get there in the dark, usually all you can see is, oh yeah, there's the sky. You might be able to point out the Milky Way. Just as a aside, there's actually a nice little sunset happening there behind me. But yeah, get there early. Try and pick your composition well before you have to set up and try and capture the night sky, the Milky Way, whatever it's going to be. So this is exactly what I mean about getting here early. It's a bit windy at the moment, but right down there below me you can see the staircase heading off. Now I'm hoping that we'll get the Milky Way rising up over that way, and this staircase here will act as a leading line. If I had been here in the dark, that entire scene behind me would have been pitch black. I wouldn't have known what I was looking at, other than coming down here with a torch. But because I'm here nice and early, I can actually try and make some sort of image out of this rather than just blankly shooting for stars and hoping there's some sort of foreground interest. So I've actually walked down these stairs heading out to the point a little bit further, and behind me there I found this beautiful staircase that curves around. Got that little rock bar out there, and I've grabbed this fantastic little app. If you haven't seen this before, it's called Photopills. Now Photopills can actually show you where the Milky Way is going to be. So I'm able to plan my shot before dark. So I can see it's going to be basically up there. The tail of it's going to come down behind that rock platform there. So I can set my shot up well before it's dark, know my composition, know exactly what I'm looking at. In a second I'll go through some of the equipment I take with me on some of these shoots, and we'll have a look at that. So I've set up here basics for a astrophotography or a nightscape shoot. Tripod, you need that camera to be still because you're going to be shooting long exposures. Decent camera, decent lens, full manual mode, and you want to be preferably having a lens with a nice low aperture, a nice low f number. Something around the 2 mark is ideal. This lens I've got on now is a f2.8, so that will work. In addition to that, I've got my camera bag here obviously, but I always carry a headlamp and a little torch. That little torch there, I always carry that. That's usually sufficient for this. The main reason for this is in case I want to do any light painting. And when you're light painting, the last thing you want is a really over bright torch that's going to blow out your highlights and end up overexposing certain areas. So you want something you know, this has got a bit of punch in it for a small torch, but not crazy and not going to blow out highlights and overexpose things. The other key reason to have a torch like this is when this is pitch black and I need to focus on my foreground here, I can't do that if it's pitch black. I need to be able to see. So that's what that torch does as well. Another very vital piece of equipment is this little bad boy here. It's just a little head torch. There'll be a lot of times tonight where I'll need some light, but I will need both hands. For example, when I'm trying to focus on the foreground or move something or whatever. So that's another vital bit of kit. And another bit is a remote shutter release. If I'm wanting to light paint down there, I either have to set my camera up on 10-second timer and run back and forth between each exposure, light painting what I need to be lit up, or I can have a remote shutter, which I've actually got a remote program in my phone that will connect to my camera, and I can trigger the shutter from anywhere within about 30-40 meters. Super handy. So I hope you can see here, this is the sort of composition I'm aiming for. You can see this path leading out from the bottom left corner. It's a bit glary, but you sort of see the idea. Path leading out from the bottom left corner, leading down and then bends around, and I think the Milky Way is going to come up sort of over there. So this path should bend around and basically point at it. So that's the composition I'm going to stick with. I've had to try and not get distracted because there is a really pretty sunset going on behind me. But I want to get here, I want to do some astro. I want to get set up for that, so I don't want to get distracted, turn around, try and take sunset photos while I'm here and get greedy. Stay the course. So while we've just got a little bit of daylight left, I thought I'd just briefly talk about how I'm going to go about doing this and creating this or images. I'm hopefully after get more than one. First thing is, my tripod and my camera are now set up. They're not going to move. I've taken a couple of exposures at this sort of low ambient light, and if need be, I will layer them into the final image. But I'm also going to talk you through how to try and capture all of this, including a Milky Way in a single image, the basic settings for that. Typically, you want to bump up your ISO to a level that your camera can handle without getting too noisy. That's the biggest, controlling factor of your settings. Then you want to drop down your aperture, your F number, to the lowest number it will go. If you have got a fantastic f1.3 lens or whatever, you can probably bump that back up to 2 and you'll actually get a clearer image than you will at right at wide open. That's going to allow in the most amount of light possible. Your ISO is the other thing that controls your light artificially, and then the only other setting we've got to adjust is shutter speed. These are going to be long exposure images. The typical rule of thumb to set your shutter speed and not get star trails or blur is, it's called the rule of 500. So the 500 rule basically states you divide 500 by the focal length of your lens. Now that's what it's set at, not necessarily what it was. So I've got a 16 to 35mm lens, currently set at 16mm. So you divide 500 by 16, you get about 31 something. So you round that to about 30 seconds. Now, I've found doing that, you often end up with blurs in the corners of the image. Maybe the center of the image, the stars are sharp, but around the corners you get blur. So what I do to compensate that is I usually bring my shutter speed more down to around 15, 20 seconds, something like that. So bear that in mind. But so for a single image, to summarize, single image here, I'll have my aperture set to f2.8, my ISO at around 1600, because my camera can handle a pretty high ISO, and my shutter speed at around 15 seconds. If I can, I'll drop that down to even 13 or 10. We'll see how we go, see how much light we've got. So I've just been trying to shoot this foreground to get that all sorted before the stars really come out. But I've just shot a couple of exposures at f5.6 and dropped the ISO down to 800 and bumped my shutter speed up to 30 seconds. The idea of doing all that is to try and reduce the noise, get a little bit better depth of field by opening up the aperture, or closing up the aperture, sorry, a little bit. And that way my foreground will hopefully look less noisy, more in focus, just to create a overall better image. But while doing that, I've also managed to create a pretty okay sort of astro image in one shot. I'll show you that now, but you know, it's not amazing, but it's a pretty good image considering I've got low ISO and an aperture of f5.6. So obviously I'm shooting a full frame camera, so if you've got a crop sensor or a cheaper camera you may not get such good results, but at f5.6 it's getting a fair amount of light in. I'm pretty happy with it, so yeah, not bad for a single image. So what I've just done is take 7 basically identical images, focused on the stars. So if you're not sure how to do that, what you want to do is go to live view in your camera, pick one of the brightest stars you can find and focus in manually on that star. That will then ensure that all of your sky is in focus. So once I've done that, I've taken 7 images simultaneously, f2.8, ISO 1600, 13-second exposures. I shouldn't have a whole lot of noise in those. Realistically, one of them, a single image at that, is probably going to be okay. But if I want really nice, really crisp, clean, clear sky, no noise at all, what I'll do is I'll take those 7 and I'll stack them in a program like Sequitur or something like that, and then I'll produce a single image with hopefully no noise and nice and sharp and clear. You can see my camera is still set up. It hasn't moved from maybe an hour or so ago, since I took that single image at 30 seconds to just show you that one. I'm probably almost done here, to be honest, and it's not even 7 p.m. so that's how quick it's getting dark here. I might do one more series just to make sure I'm coming away with something good, and then I'll head out and I'll show you the finished product. This is exactly why you should always check your images before you leave the field. I've just scrolled through those 7 images there, and I'll bring you in for a look. If you scroll through, I hope you can see that there. You can see the cloud moving, and I'll go back to the start. If you scroll through, you can see there's a little bit of cloud over the Milky Way core here, and it's moving. So there's no way those are going to line up appropriately. So what I'm going to do is wait until that band of cloud disappears, and then I'm going to shoot a whole new set again, hopefully this time cloudless. We'll see how we go. So I'm just finishing up here, and what I've decided to do is take a couple of exposures to try and get this foreground a bit more natural looking. It was a bit too blue, obviously because I was taking photos in the blue hour earlier. So I've done a couple of really long exposures now. I've increased the shutter speed to 2 minutes and 50 seconds, and I've dropped the aperture down to f5.6 and the ISO down to 800. Try and get a bit more depth of field, a little bit less noise in that foreground, a bit more natural looking, and as a result I've had to do a 2 minute and 50 second exposure. I've used the app on my phone to use the bulb mode on my camera, so there's no camera shake when I'm turning it off or on or anything like that. So that's probably the foreground I'm going to go with, I think. I'll hopefully show you that in a sec as well. So part of the fun of really long exposures is a really long camera processing time. So that's the camera in the background there processing. And this is the app I've been using on my phone to control it. You can see I've got the bulb mode down there. Other than that, yeah, f5.6, ISO 800, and my shot, that exposure just then was 2 minutes 50 seconds. And there it is. So I'm just back in the car after doing some astrophotography out at Long Reef Point there. It was difficult conditions with wispy cloud coming over and blocking the Milky Way, but I think I've got some shots. I had to shoot the images that I planned on stacking to reduce noise twice, because the first time got ruined by clouds moving through the core of the Milky Way. I think the single image I did initially, I think that's come out okay, and I also shot some very long exposures of the foreground at the end to see if I can get a bit more detail and less noise in the foreground. So I'm off home now. I'll put them all on the computer and process them and see what we end up with, but I'll hopefully show you those images at the end. And thanks for watching. See you next time.